Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and welcome to a topic that's close to my heart, and that is 5 things not to do in your 50s. Now, the 50s can be a great decade. I'm not going to be a pessimist here. I mean, things that may be on the tick-off fantastic list. Number 1, a lot of people will have cleared their mortgage or perhaps be close to doing so. Number 2, children may have grown up and left home. Now that may not be a good thing emotionally, but financially, perhaps they're more independent than they used to be. And thirdly, some people will be in the fortunate position of being able to dial down work, maybe even stop work altogether. So there's lots of positives here, but I want to just iterate 5 things to avoid doing to basically bring some of those positives sort of crashing down. So number 1, don't lose money. Now this was Warren Buffett's rule number 1, and then he quipped that rule number 2 is don't forget about rule number 1, but basically building wealth is about balancing risk and return. And we'll have started a long time before our 50s, hopefully. So risky behaviours. What can basically upset the apple cart if you've done the hard work of saving regularly, trying to build wealth up into your 50s? Well, stopping work too early. It's tempting post-pandemic to think, that's it, had enough. And I've spoken to enough people who are doing that. But just be careful, I'll come back to this in a moment. Starting a business. Now, starting a business can be a fantastic idea if you know what you're doing and you've got a plan, but crikey, it's stressful and it's quite risky. All right, upgrading assets unnecessarily and expensively. Don't take on big piles of debt in your 50s, because as a friend of mine put it, if you take on debt you can't pay back in your 20s, you've got time to recover, decades to recover. Take out a loan that's actually more than you can chew, if you like, in your 50s, and you may put yourself under a degree of financial pressure. And try and avoid a midlife crisis, where you go out and start spending money on assets, on clothes that are frankly probably inappropriate. All right? So things not to do. In other words, you've balanced risk and return up to this point. Don't blow it in the decade of your 50s. Don't think, now's my chance to make that one-off big lump sum that I didn't make before, and put all of that hard work at risk potentially. Number 2, don't de-risk. What I mean by that is a healthy individual in their 50s could look forward to living another 30, 40 years, no one knows for sure, and yet you may find, as you look through some of the products you've bought in the past, designed to pay out, for example, get you to a conventional retirement, you may find some of them are starting to heavily de-risk as you get into your 50s, and that may not be appropriate. Why not? Well, maybe you're planning to carry on working, at least part-time. Maybe you're not looking to retire anytime soon. So, a product that's de-risking you as though you're about to stop work may not be the right thing. Intergenerational transfers of things like pensions means that you don't have to spend down pots like you used to. So, if they're automatically de-risking, you need to at least have a look under the bonnet and say, is that appropriate for me? And of course, we've all got to beat inflation, and inflation's on the rise. So if you've got a fund sitting there quietly removing the equity component, for example, putting you into so-called safe havens, maybe, going back to that rule number 1 of Warren Buffett, you are losing money because you're no longer keeping pace with inflation. So be careful, worth checking out what you're invested in. Number 3, don't panic. All right, many people think, oh crikey, I haven't done enough. I've got to my 50s, I'm going to run out of money. All right, but actually a lot of people overestimate the risk of running out of money. It's a valid fear when you stop work or dial down work. Of course, fear number 1, can I afford to still live? But actually, there are plenty of ways in your 50s, if you haven't completely dialed out of work, to actually boost the amount you'll have available in the future. So if your employer allows it, think about doing salary sacrifice. We've said some of the overheads you used to carry might have gone by the board a little bit in terms of property costs, children and so on. So if you can afford salary sacrifice, that's an incredibly tax efficient way to boost the amount in your retirement pot. Defer stopping work. I'll come back to that in a moment. So that has all sorts of benefits because it means you've got longer to save, less time to draw, and that means that the balance in terms of what you get out of your pot will be more favourable. And think about doing a pensions review. In your 50s, it's a good time to hunt down all those little scrappy pensions you might have had from former employers and possibly have forgotten about. I'm not saying you should consolidate them, but at least by consolidating them, you've got them in sort of one place. I mean, you may lose some valuable benefits by doing so, so I'm not going to say you must consolidate, but at least track them down, at least know what they are. Next one, people will groan at, don't retire too soon. All right, I mentioned this earlier. We all think we want to stop working as soon as possible. A lot of people do, but we need a plan. There are a lot of hours in a week if you just stop work, take the carriage clock from the employer and disappear off into the sunset. And it's a financial double whammy. Don't forget, if you stop work, you're going to start spending money and you're not earning it. All right? So those hard-earned reserves can start getting sort of battered fairly quickly, and it's hard to reverse. After a pandemic, it's tempting to say, right, I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. There's other things I want to do, and that's fine. But actually, getting back into the employment market in your 50s is definitely not as easy as it might have been even 10 years ago. Now, that's me saying ageism is alive and well in the employment market. Well, I'm afraid there's plenty of evidence that suggests it is. Finally, don't develop bad habits. Okay, health is true wealth. Thanks for that little cliche, Tim. But what I mean by that is, if you are dialing down work, don't go mad. People sort of think they're going to change their lifestyle once they dial down work, and that might be unwise. So spend well and wisely, and I've done videos on this in the past. Don't splurge necessarily. Set targets. People need structure when they give up work, and if you're going to do that, make sure you've got a structure both in terms of how you want to live and how you're going to pay for it all. And share knowledge and experience. Have a plan. There's a famous quip that, people say, I wish I had more time, but given that time, they've got no idea what they're actually going to do with it. So sharing knowledge and experience can be a great way to still contribute if you're actually dialing down the day job or even thinking about ending it altogether. So there we are, 5 tips, things to avoid in your 50s. If you'd like to know more about any of these topics, then killick.com/learn will get you into my extensive video library. And if you'd like to sort of read all about it, there are a couple of options. The latest issue of Confidant is one of them. These how-to guides, there are 6, only 2 sitting next to me, and they're available at editor@killick.com.